I'm Lance Yelvington for CyberCountry. The Oak Ridge Boys are men of faith, and like a lot of us, they began their life journey, as well as their music journey, sitting in the pews of churches. In this CyberCountry Minute, Duane Allen of the Oak Ridge Boys is going to talk to us about their new CD, Rock of Ages, which is a collection of the old traditional hymns that you and I remember, as well as a new book about life on the road with the Oaks.
Well, this all started with a phone call from Bill Gaither. Bill Gaither called and said, "You know, I listen to a lot of country music, and I hear the Oak Ridge Boys singing. All of you have had hit songs as the lead singer of the Oak Ridge Boys. You've all got 4 distinctively different voices, but I recognize all of those voices. If they come on in the middle of the night, I know who it is. I wonder what it would sound like if I heard these voices singing songs that you grew up in church singing, like the old hymns. What would that sound like?" So I said, well, I've had a vision about doing a recording that is kind of backwards from what we normally do. First, let me say, normally is we hire all these musicians, and they're really expensive and they're great. The best musicians in the world live in Nashville, and we bring about 7 or 8 musicians into the studio, and we do 3-hour sessions, and we try to get track work done. We cut all the musical tracks, and later we come in and sing the vocal work on there. We try to get as much track work done because we want to get as many tracks done as we can while these expensive musicians are in there. And we come in later and we sing vocals to, basically we're doing karaoke to our own tracks. Now that's not bad because we planned how we're going to record them in advance, but we've been very successful in doing that. But I wanted to do this one differently, and I wanted to capture the magic of the 4 voices first. And I had this vision of the Oak Ridge Boys singing in a bathroom where we have concrete walls and like a gymnasium or something. You go in there and everybody's singing a cappella, and you can hear all that harmonies, and then all at once all the overtones start happening over, and it sounds like a recording studio, and it sounds so good. I wanted to capture that. I wanted to capture the magic of 4 voices singing together. So right in your face, I want to get that first. I said, "Is that something like you would want to do?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Who do you want to record it with?" And I said, "Well, Ben Isaacs has co-produced the last 2 or 3 albums with me, and he works really good with the Oak Ridge Boys. So he knows harmony. He's a genius at that. So let me call him and see if he can catch on to this vision." I called him, and I hadn't said 2 or 3 words. He said, "I'm in." He said, "I want to cut the Oak Ridge Boys just like that." I said, "Okay, all right." Well, I then called. I went through a series of emails with all the Oak Ridge Boys, and I said, "You know, if you could imagine yourself as a little boy in a little country church somewhere where you grew up, and your little church had maybe 3 pews in the choir part, and you were standing on in the front pew, and the 4 Oak Ridge Boys were there singing at the top of your lungs, dreaming of one day being in a 4-part harmony group with the voices we have now that are highly identifiable, but you dreaming about singing like that as a little boy. What would it sound like?" And that's what I want to capture. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I ask each boy to think about that and send me what they want to sing. I want to know what you want to be featured on. What titles? What song that you grew up singing you'd like to sing on this hymns album? So one by one, they started coming in. I mean, at that point, the Oak Ridge Boys were totally into this project. I mean, this has been a group project from word go. Everybody has been involved. Richard was first, I think, to come back, and he said, "I want to do Blessed Assurance." So I sang with J.D. Sumner and the Stamps when we were back in Elvis, and J.D. sang the verses on Blessed Assurance. I want to channel J.D. and sing those verses. Okay, I got an email from William Lee, said, "I want to do Blessed Assurance." Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We got a problem here? Not really. I kept reading, and William Lee said, "You know, when we did the homecoming tent show with the Gaither people on the Billy Graham campground, Cliff Barras directed everybody singing And William Lee sang to me over the phone, "This is my story." He said, "I want to hear that chorus like that." Well, good, problem solved. Richard sing the verses of Blessed Assurance. William Lee direct the courses. I said, "Okay, William, you direct the courses. We'll follow you." And he said, "I don't direct you usually direct these things." I said, "No, but you do it. You feel it. We'll follow you. Just body motion. Just, you let us know. We'll put everybody in four corners in the studio out at Ricky Skaggs' studio, a studio that I built in 1970. And it was like going home. And so we got where we could see each other. And William Lee directed us, and sure enough, that's how we cut that song. And every song had a moment like that. I turned to Joe and I said, "I'd like to hear you do I Love to Tell the Story." And Joe said, "Well, I'd love to hear you sing Farther Along like you did at George Jones' funeral. Mm-hmm. That had so much emotion. I want to hear you singing that." William Lee said, "I'd like to sing Time Has Made a Change in Me." Well, by that time, everybody was so into it. I called Bill Gaither and I said, "Man, the Oak Ridge Boys are on fire. We're ready to go." Bill Gaither said, "Well, why don't you include some Appalachian hymn type things like Hold to God's Unchanging Hand and O Come Angel Band." Mm-hmm. And I said, "That sounds great, man. We want to touch on all of the different ways people grew up, and we'll touch on that." And so that's kind of how it started forming. Then we got into the studio, and William Lee started singing Time Has Made a Change in Me, and man, he was going through a horrible day in his life. And the emotion that he was going through and the passion that he felt that day, man, it started showing up in his voice. And the emotion had his voice cracking in places. But it was real. And he got to the end, he said, "I may have to redo some of this." I said, "No, don't touch it." I said, "We're not cutting a perfect album. We're cutting a real album. I want it to be real. I want our raw emotions to be, I want that what the people hears. I want it to be real. These are hymns of the church. I want people to know that we're feeling something when we do these songs. And it's okay. It's okay if you got a crack in your voice. It's okay if you sing something a little off pitch. It's okay if there's a clam in your voice or something. It's okay. Let's just say let's make it real, make it raw." And with that attitude, we went through each song, and each song had its own time of emotion, each one of them, all 15 of them. Mm-hmm. And along the way, actually this started happening about a year before we recorded. I'd got a song from Merle Haggard, and my son-in-law was playing with Marty Stewart, the Fabulous Superlatives. And Paul Martin, they were doing the RFD television show, and Merle was guesting on that. So Merle brought him a CD and handed it to Paul, said, "Get this to Duane. I'd like for the Oaks to think about recording this song." So Paul brought it home, brought it by the house. I listened to it, I loved the song. And I called Merle and I said, "I love this song, but," I said, "right now we're about to put out a live album of hits, and it doesn't fit that. And the next thing, I've got to finish a Christmas album, and it doesn't fit that." I said, "If you can wait a little bit, we may cut a hymns album, and I'll try to make it fit that." And he said, "You can hold it as long as you want to." He said, "It's for you." I said, "Well, okay." Well, in a few months, Bill Gaither called and said, "How about doing a hymns album? Out of the blue." Okay, well, that song is still going around in my head, so I called Merle back. And we got the sessions into the book. I said, "We're going to do that hymns album. We'll cut that song." But I said, "You got a recitation in that second verse, and I don't think I can do it justice. Would you honor us and come be our guest and sing with the Oak Ridge Boys and do that recitation and sing that last chorus with us? Would you do that?" He said, "Whatever you want." I said, "That's what we want. You'd really honor the Oak Ridge Boys. We're all super, he's like a hero to us." He said, whatever you want. And so that's how we got Merle Haggard on this album. And the Isaacs also are on the album with us. I'd had this song Peace Within for about 30 years. Tried to get it on an album. For 4 or 5 albums I'd brought it out, and it just didn't fit anything. And when Bill Gaither said, be sure and touch on that Appalachian hymn type thing, make sure you touch on that, I knew this one would fit. So we cut Peace Within with that flavor. The Oaks did our part. We put on the Isaacs. And then we were listening down to it. I'm a collector of groups. I love group singing. I've got everything in the catalog of the Everlys, the Luvens, the Sons of the Pioneers, all of the doo-wop groups, the Motown groups. I've got all the black gospel groups. I've got their whole catalogs. And I found in the black gospel catalogs a black lady who was talking about the way she went around the house. She said, sometimes I go around the house, and when I'm worshiping the Lord, I just moan. I just go, and she said, and all at once I can just feel it, And I thought, that's what I want to hear on this Peace Within. So I said, Sonia, stay out there. Stay out there just a minute. And I kind of painted the picture. I said, just think about hearing this song on the radio or on your stereo, and you're in your house doing your chores, and you want to sing along with it, and you're kind of answering our phrases, but you're kind of moaning the answers. You're just moaning after. You might want to put some words in there. Anything, thank you, Jesus, anything you want to put in there. Just do whatever you feel like, that last chorus. And I'm going to turn on the tape deck. Now, I'm going to turn on the recorder and the mic, and you just do what you feel like. Turned it on, got to the end. She said, got real quiet. I said, come on in. She said, well, I was just rehearsing. I was just running. I said, no, that's it. That's what I want. I said, I don't want you to think about it. I want you to do what you feel. That's what I wanted. I wanted something that was spontaneity. So if you listen to that Peace Within, listen to Sonia on the last chorus. That's a one-take thing. That's a piece of magic. It's just there. That whole album has pieces of magic throughout the whole album, and that's how each song kind of developed. Mm-hmm. Each one of those songs came together with pieces of magic that happened like that.
So it's really a statement of faith then, the way that whole thing came together, with you guys coming up with the concept and with all the songs, really.
Yeah, and really by cutting the 4 vocalists first, we started with just a piano. And Ben Isaacs, of course, plays upright bass, so we'll put that in there because that won't take away from the voices. And we thought about using a click track, but that's pretty sterile. Let's get a drummer who is a vocalist drummer who won't get in the way of our voices, but will just give us some texture. And when we start building up in the choruses, will help build us a little bit, but won't get in our way. And let's get a guitarist, Jimmy Couch, who will just play flat top guitar and maybe a little picking here and there. They're just not getting our way at all, just to give it a little texture. And that's all. That's all we use. I want to capture the 4 voices. I want it to be a vocal album, not a production, a 4 voices album. And then we'll send all the voices home. And we did. And then we brought in a harmonica player, put it over here at a place or two, a fiddle over here, mando over here, a little banjo here, a little dobro here. And just not in the whole album, just in places where it would add to, but in no place where it would take from the voices. But I wanted the voices to be the focal point of this album because I think there's a magic in 4-part singing. And I wanted the people to feel what the 4 of us feel when we sing together. And I think we were able to capture that. Yeah,
well, especially with 4 Men of Faith, I mean, you can't take away from the spirit that's brought forth through your singing, too.
Right. And we were all brought up, we're all men of faith, and we were all brought up in the church. We're all believers. So this was a chance to with each guy picking his song. Listen to the songs everybody picked, and you'll see the songs that people want. Each one of the boys wanted to say something in their songs.
That's cool.
And every guy got to pick his own songs, his own leads, what he wanted to sing, what he wanted to say, and it's all there. It's what the Oak Ridge Boys wanted to say about how we were brought up in the church.
Yeah, well, you say in doing that too, you're bringing a lot of stuff that people forget about today, especially, and for a lot of us that do go to church on a regular basis, there's that root that we need to get back to, and that's kind of cool what you guys did.
Well, we all grew up singing these old hymns, and in today's church there's a lot of praise and worship songs being sung, and those are good. But I miss some of the old hymns being sung, and we addressed that in this album, and that's what you'll get on this album.
Now, let's talk about the book, about On the Road for, 40 years. How did this come about quickly, or just was it something that Joe came up with one day saying, hey, why don't we try this? And then you said, well, that's a good idea. Let's see if we can put our ideas together in a book.
Well, Joe is recognized as being our book writer, and he's really good. And he works at it really hard. He works at it a lot. I work in production, and I work at that a lot, finding songs and stuff, where Joe works a lot at writing books, and he's really good at it. And a publisher came to him and asked him if he could come up with stories behind the scene of what stories that have never been told. And Joe has written books on the Oak Ridge Boys before. He wrote a table book, American Journey, on the Oak Ridge Boys. That is a coffee table book where you can thumb through it and see a chapter and read that chapter, and you can go somewhere else and read, and each one is a little story tidbit in itself. This book is kind of the same way, but there are stories that haven't been told yet. Like, I'll give you one example. If I were to say to you, squeeze on, what would that mean to you?
No idea.
Okay, well, when the Oak Ridge Boys go in to get our show ready at any town, USA, and we go in and we do a sound check or we rehearse, and all of our band is there, all of our crew is there, and we've done all of our sound check, and backstage in some room, the people who do our catering are preparing a meal for us. And there are a whole bunch of stagehands that we hire locally that are there as well. If we get on a microphone and say, it's time for a meal, everybody, all of those stagehands will beat us in line and be there before we can get there because they've got their job done already. But if we go to the microphone and say, squeeze on, that means it's time to eat. Let's go eat. That's what squeeze on means. And that means that everybody in our organization knows what that means, and we can go to the meal and we'll be first in line. Just little things like that.
Well, they have to come up with something different now.
Well, they know what that is now. But it's a story about things that go on that make the Oak Ridge Boys tick. Mm-hmm. Things behind the scenes that you've not heard before. And it's stories that have not been told. And that's one of them. And it's a book full of that. And Joe started with a huge book, and he condensed it down to a smaller book. And there's many more stories to come. But this is a story of good ones.
Also, let's talk about the induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. I'll be honest, I already thought you all were in the Country Music Hall of Fame. What took them so long?
Well, some people say that, and some people say I thought it should have happened a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at first how to respond to that because I want to respond with class. Mm-hmm. And I think the best response that I could come up with is just right on time, because we're still working. We're out there 150 mm-hmm. days a year. And Joe said something the other day that I really liked. He said, I'm glad they did it while we're still alive, because now we'd like to be ambassadors for the Country Music Hall of Fame. We'd like to get out there and tell everybody what we've got for people to see here in Nashville. It's a beautiful building, and we'd like for people to come to Nashville to see the Country Music Hall of Fame. And now, as members of that, we'll be able to do that.
And all things in God's time.
Yeah, I think it's just at the right time. You know, we've worked a long time. We're already members of the Gospel Music Hall of Fame and several other, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, and each of us in our own state are members of the Hall of Fame in each state. But this is the crowning glory of the country music business, is the Country Music Hall of Fame. And I'm so blessed and thankful that it happened while we're still alive and working, that we can say thank you to everybody. That's what we want to do. Hey, this is Duane Allen with the Oak Ridge Boys. Thanks for coming to CyberCountry. Stay tuned here for a lot of different information on the Oak Ridge Boys. You can hear about our new hymns album, Rock of Ages. Or you can hear about Joe's new book, On the Road with the Oak Ridge Boys, 40 years of stories and adventures with the Oak Ridge Boys that are untold up to this point. You can also hear about the dates that we're going to be working, and if you'd like to go to our website, oakridgeboys.com, you can keep up with what we're doing.